Welcome to Edison Open Forum Cannabinoids 2021. My name's Vivienne Parry. Now, legalization, increasing acceptance and demand for both pharmaceutical and consumer products mean the cannabinoid industry is booming. By 2026, the global market is estimated to be worth $60 billion, but biosynthesis could take it to new heights. Edison Open Forum asked the brightest minds in CBD what they think the impact of biosynthesis will be and what's next for their sector. With me is Shane Johnson, General Manager of Biomedica and Senior VP at InMed, and one of our favorite friends, if I may say so, here on Edison TV. Hello, Shane, how are you?
Doing very well, thank you.
So you've been dealing with great news recently. Tell me firstly about InMed, then tell me about Biomedica and how the two are coming together.
Sure. So, I think, as you know, InMed historically has been focused on the pharmaceutical development of rare cannabinoids. They have two programs at play. One is in the clinic, and that's the program around CBN for the treatment of epidermolysis bullosa, a very rare skin disorder, and that has just entered phase 2 clinical trials. So very exciting. And the other program is in glaucoma. Is a bit earlier stage. It's still preclinical, but they've been, got some tremendous data, at the preclinical stage, and looking forward to moving that forward. I think it's important to understand that historically what InMed has done is they have actually worked on biosynthesis, in their case using E. coli bacteria as the, call it organism or chassis. And they've also ultimately kind of optimized what they've done in terms of what they call integrison, or we call integrison. I have to get used to the they versus we. The integrison platform, which is an enzyme-based biotransformation that is used to support pharmaceutical-grade manufacturing of the cannabinoids that they are putting into the clinic in development. So very strong programs there, a lot of great history, a lot of capability on the manufacturing front. What Biomedica brings to the table, in our case, is yeast-based biosynthesis as opposed to E. coli bacteria, so potentially complementary organisms or systems. There may be certain circumstances where one has an advantage over the other, as well as chemistry-based manufacturing techniques, and we can talk about that a little bit more, hopefully. But our focus is also on rare cannabinoids, so a lot of synergy there. We also have put a fair bit of time and energy into developing some intellectual property and working on building out a portfolio of novel analogs. And when I say novel analogs, I mean cannabinoids that are not found in nature, but are slight variations of what you would find in nature. And the expectation or anticipation is that some of these will perform better than the cannabinoids you would find in nature for pharmaceutical development purposes. So they may have a better efficacy profile or better safety profile. So compounds that are well suited for pharmaceutical development, and ultimately we intend to feed into the pipeline here at InMed.
And actually, for someone or for a company that are looking at rare cannabinoids, actually biosynthesis is really the only way to go, isn't it? Because you have such tiny quantities, you'd have to have such a huge amount of biomass in order to extract the rare cannabinoid.
Correct. I mean, and to be clear, when we say biosynthesis, obviously in this discussion, we're talking about using an organism such as bacteria or yeast to do the manufacturing for us. But let's be very clear that the hemp plant does biosynthesis as well. I think it's important to understand that. I mean, the plant uses enzymes to make these compounds. But yes, you're right. When we're in this circumstance, and it's not just biosynthesis, though. I would say alternative synthetic approaches, whether that's biosynthesis or chemical synthesis. Again, the plant chemistry takes place in the plant. And to get to certain cannabinoids, biosynthesis alone probably won't do it. There's a company out there in the hemp space that I know of that has, gotten very efficient at extracting a hemp-derived CBG, and they have actually done chemical conversions of that to make CBC, which is a compound that we're very familiar with because it's our lead compound. So there are a lot of techniques that are employed ultimately, but yes, to make rare cannabinoids in any sort of meaningful volume using non-plant-based approaches, biosynthesis, chemical synthesis, hybrid approaches is critical, I believe.
Now, we've seen an extraordinary explosion of interest in the cannabinoid sector. You've been involved for some time. What do you think is driving this huge demand at the moment?
I think it's multifactorial. I mean, look, we had a war on drugs for many decades that prevented research, prevented, consumer products being developed, et cetera. So a part of this is just, all of a sudden, it's like, wait, I can actually, I'm a scientist, I'm a researcher at Harvard. I can now actually do research in an area where historically I wasn't able to do research. And there's a great level of excitement around that. So at the scientific level, I think we're seeing a whole array of prominent scientists in some cases embracing that the endocannabinoid system is a real physiological system in the human body, that cannabinoids that are found in the plant have potentially very significant roles in human health and wellness. And we've seen that. And we now have multiple FDA approved drugs, but most recently, non-psychoactive CBD-based drug, Epidiolex, for the treatment of severe seizures in many cases, young children. And so we're seeing the science explode, the knowledge base.
I mean, scientists are basically being given permission to do this. In a very general sense, because before they daren't even go there, even if they were interested, because it was just too difficult an area.
Correct. It's still a difficult area, to be clear, in many parts of the world, including here in the US. If you want to study, Delta-9 THC or another cannabinoid that is an intoxicating cannabinoid, it's still a very difficult area to study. You don't necessarily have free reign yet, but the fact that at a state-by-state level here in the US, many states have opened up, obviously legalized cannabis. That's enabled researchers in certain institutions to do, to really start to do quite a bit of research, get access to material that they may need to use to do the, scientific studies of interest to them. And obviously in the non-intoxicating space, so when we talk about CBD and many of the other cannabinoids, they are not intoxicating, they are not scheduled compounds. And so that's an area where people are now able to study, they're now able to dive in and do the research. And again, historically, they really have just avoided that hands down because of the regulatory landscape. So, and that's a big part of this. The regulatory landscape continues to evolve. The direction in general is toward a greater loosening, if you will, of the laws to enable research, to enable products to be made that contain cannabinoids. And then lastly, you have the consumer. The consumer hears about this. The consumer is curious. The consumer has more awareness. And so they are trying these products, and in some cases finding products that work well for them, a CBD product for skincare or whatever it is, or CBC or CBG, or a tincture that may help them with the aches and pains. So there's a lot of, I think that whole consumer chain and feedback loop of people saying, hey, have you tried this? And that is also contributing greatly to, I think, the market explosion or growth, as it were.
I mean, Shane, has that consumer end of it really taken you by surprise? Because you can't walk into any store without being offered, not just CBD tinctures, but dog biscuits, CBD impregnated pants, for heaven's sake. I mean, the range is astonishing.
Yeah, no, it is. And to be honest, I think some of that is, so it's both surprising and not surprising. Again, there's a lot of curiosity. The endocannabinoid system is innate to each and every one of us. It's not entirely surprising that, all of a sudden we're making more products with these cannabinoids in them. I think what you're going to see over time is that it's going to move away from just quote unquote CBD and start to become, you're going to start to see an array of products, especially as the scientific data and the knowledge base begins to support it. You're going to see a broader array of products out there targeting specific, conditions or symptoms, as it were. So, so you may have products that are optimized for sleep, others that are optimized for, anxiety, others that are just for general, kind of gut health, so a variety of different things. And ultimately you're going to see cannabinoids combined, and people are already doing this, combined with other what are called adaptogenic herbs. So there's a lot to learn, a lot to do, and I think a lot of excitement around where this can go in terms of products that ultimately are based in nature, even if some of the means of making the compounds is not based in nature. And I think it's important for people to understand. I'll just go on a tangent for a moment, that a lot of products that are out there in the consumer space today contain compounds that may be found in nature, but are manufactured through other methodologies, whether it's biosynthesis, whether it's pure chemistry, chemical synthesis. Vitamin D in milk is a good example. At least here in the US, virtually all milk has vitamin D, extra vitamin D added to it. I don't know anybody who looks at that and says, ooh, that's synthetic, I don't want that vitamin D. To the contrary, it's just accepted that, oh, it's got vitamin D. That vitamin D is good for me, therefore I'm going to drink this milk, or give it to my kid and feel comfortable giving it to my kid. So
there does seem at the moment to be a bit of a, this is natural and this is not, and some consumers will have a view on that, despite the fact that, as you point out, Shane, quite rightly, it's all chemistry. But I wonder if you feel that some of the hype that is surrounding the cannabinoid sector at the moment has the potential to damage the reputations of serious companies in the space.
Well, absolutely. I mean, we've already seen that. I mean, the FDA has sent out warning letters to companies that have been, made products and are making label claims that aren't supported by rigorous scientific study. You've got, it's been an relatively unregulated space. And again, most of my comments should be taken as being focused on kind of the US-based market, as opposed to other markets that may have different frameworks. But here in the US, it's been a bit of a wild west in terms of, people making various products, and some of those products are super high quality products and made by very ethical companies that are trying their best not to overstate what the products may or may not do for somebody. But other products are, people are just trying to make a fast dollar, and get a product out there, and they make claims that probably shouldn't be made, or they may even have, there's been a lot of news and news out there around products being tested and finding out that only a small fraction of them actually have in them what they say they have in them, or other products being tested and maybe they've got pesticides or other solvents or other contaminants that were never properly removed. So there's a big issue, I think, with what you're describing, and that's honestly where, again, ultimately this industry needs to mature and evolve. And I think that's where bigger players, more mainstream players, ultimately have a strong role, as well as smaller startups that, maintain an eye on the prize and do it properly and don't shortcut any steps.
I want to ask you where you think InMed is going in the near future, but before asking you that, I wanted to just get an idea of where you think the cannabinoid sector is going to be in 5 years' time. We've said we're asking the brightest minds. Well, you are one of those brightest minds, Shane. So where do you think the sector is going? I mean, from what you've said, you think that it needs to mature. Some of these companies that are kind of slightly flying by the seat of their pants will probably disappear. And then what will we be left with?
Well, sure. I think you're going to see consolidation. I think you're going to see fewer companies doing it right. I mean, it wasn't very long ago that I think data or some statistics I read said that there were over 3,000 CBD brands in the US. That's a lot of brands, focused on a singular kind of product line. So is that sustainable? I don't know that it is. So I think you're going to see consolidation. I think you're going to see the brands that do things right. Kind of expand their market presence. I mean, the market is incredibly fragmented right now. I don't think that there's any player out there that has, in the I'll call it non-intoxicating, cannabinoid space, has more than a couple few percent of the entire market. So when you look at much more mature markets, that's not the case. You see there are typically a few big players, and those few big players may have many brands under them, but at the end of the day, it's a bit more centralized. So I think we are going to see.
That's a really interesting perspective, Shane. And biosynthesis within or alternative synthesis methods, you think that is here to stay?
Absolutely. I mean, again, look, I think that what are currently today rare cannabinoids are going to become less rare. The best means to make many of those compounds is going to be via non-plant based starting points, whether that's biosynthesis or chemistry or some combination thereof. Ultimately, some of these rare cannabinoids are going to have unique properties that THC, CBD, and CBG don't have. And so that will drive market demand and interest. So I absolutely think that it's here to stay. It's also a much more consistent, repeatable manufacturing platform. I mean, if you're growing a plant, you're subject to, especially if you're trying to do it inexpensively, you're probably growing outdoors. You're subject to climate change or whether that's a hailstorm or a drought. You're subject to pesticides being blown in from the neighbor's farm, whatever the potential issues are. And if you're a mainstream CPG company embracing a product or a product line that includes cannabinoids, you want probably redundant supply chains. You want to be assured that you're not going to have variability batch to batch. It's much easier to do that when you're making products or the underlying ingredients in stainless steel vessels as opposed to out in a field. That's not to say that there's anything wrong with the field. And certainly if the product you want to make is a hemp cigarette, you're probably going to be using plant material. But for individual cannabinoids, especially rare cannabinoids, for consumer products, as well as obviously for pharmaceutical development, I think that alternative methodologies of making those is here to stay.
And of course, even if you grow the crop inside, there is a real sustainability issue because of the use of power, water, all those other kind of things. But I want to return to the recent marriage, if I can put it like that, of InMed and Biomedica. How's that all going, and what can we expect from InMed in the next few months and years?
Yeah, well, we just closed the deal a week ago today, so in terms of how it's going, it's still fairly nascent. I think what you can expect, right now we're focused on really integrating the teams, developing, kind of what I would call joint priorities, and ultimately laying out the milestones that, as a kind of a unified company, we will be targeting over the coming quarters and years. So that's a process, obviously. I mean, we do have two relatively small teams. So on the one hand, it's fairly efficient. The other hand, there's still, the diligence process of getting to, a merger only takes you so far. And then it's really kind of diving under the covers, yet another layer on both sides to really, develop some of those priorities together. So that's a key focus for all of us right now. On the BayMedica side, I think over the coming quarters, we do intend to launch, some other rare cannabinoids. So I think you can expect that you'll see some activity on that front, but we're not committing to specific timelines right now.
It's always a pleasure talking to you, Shane. Thank you so much for being with us and for some very interesting insights on cannabinoids. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Vivienne. Really appreciate it.